So they were really unique in what they did.
The 1950s were drawing to a close, and the sport-turned-industry's focus to the next decade was about to shift almost universally to California. And who better to personify the iconic California lifestyle than the legend Larry Scott?
Yeah, Larry Scott was the personification of the California beach boy, even though he was born in Idaho and his blonde hair was dyed.
I met Joe in '61 through the magazines because I was appearing in the magazines, and he took an interest in me and started putting his arm around me and started seeing how he could help my career, just out of the goodness of his heart, and for his business too. You know, he was trying to get some pictures of the guys for his magazines, so it was a win-win situation.
The biggest magazine in those days, in the 30s and 40s, was Strength and Health, run by Bob Hoffman, who did bodybuilding but was more into weightlifting. He'd give them preference.
And at that time, there was a real struggle going on between Bob Hoffman and Joe Weider. And Bob Hoffman hated bodybuilders, but he was a powerlifting guy. And so he thought that was sissy stuff to be a bodybuilder, and you should be showing how much you could lift and everything. So they didn't get along.
He used to hold contests, bodybuilding contests, but in conjunction with the weightlifting. And the weightlifting would go on first. And the bodybuilders would not come on till midnight. They were like second-class citizens. Joe wanted to give bodybuilders the proper respect and forum.
I said, I want to be Mr. America. And he says, why don't you enter my contest? And it was the IFBB. And it was just starting, this idea. And I thought, I didn't say it to him, but I thought, who wants to win IFBB? Who knows IFBB? I want to win AAU, Mr. America. That's what I want. I said, no, Joe. I said, I got my heart set on AAU. He says, you can't win that. I says, why not? And he says, because that's fixed. He picks who wins that contest. And I said, well, I think I can do it. I still can. So, and I met Isaac Berger, who was a powerlifter. And he says, I know Bob Hoffman. He says, you got to meet him. You got to get to know him. You got to get in good with Bob Hoffman, or you'll never win his contest. So he said, at the next Mr. America, which was in Santa Monica, in which Joe Benda won it, he said, you come backstage after that contest, and I'll introduce you to Bob Hoffman. I said, all right, great. So we went backstage at the AAU, and he took me up to Bob Hoffman. He says, Bob, there's someone here that wants to meet you. Larry Scott would like to meet you. And Bob Hoffman turned around, he looked at me, and he said, oh yes, I've seen him in other magazines. And turned his back on me. Isaac Berger walked off, and I'm standing there on stage. He's got his back turned to me, and just leaves me there. And I thought, I walked off. And I thought, here I'm talking to Joe Weider, and he's giving me all this help and encouragement and everything. He turned his back on me when I want to enter his contest. I said, that's it. I'm done with AAU.
Joe Weider, you know, he was a visionary, and he established the Mr. Olympia contest in 1965, and the reason he established it, there was two federations, and you could win Mr. America once, and that was it. You could win the IFBB Mr. Universe, but then there was nowhere for these guys to go. So he said, I want to create the ultimate bodybuilding competition, and he was having dinner with Larry Scott in 1964.
We were sitting there having dinner, and we started talking about, and I had just won the universe, and they said, we need to come up with a contest in which all the Mr. Universes can compete in. All the Mr. Americas, Mr. Universe can compete against one another and see who is the best in the world. I said, that's a great idea. Maybe we get Bill Pearl and these other guys that were heroes to come in. I'd like to see how I would stand up next to them.
And Joe says, look, we're going to get a new competition, and what are you going to call it, Larry said. And they were drinking Olympia beer. This is a true story. And Joe said, well, call it Mr. Olympia.
Let's not call it that. That's a beer. Let's call it something that sounds health-producing or something, like Mr. Broccoli. That wasn't what I said. But something better than Olympia. Well, anyway, I lost. We voted on it. He says, no, Olympia. He says, think of Mount Olympus, like the grandeur of that. And I said, yeah, I can see that. And so we decided then there to call it Mr. Olympia.
Now, If they'd have been drinking Schlitz Malt Ale, we'd have had Mr. Schlitz Malt Ale now, you know.
Well, let's see. I won the first Mr. Olympia in 1965, and they provided a $1,000 gift. First time. I mean, you had to pay your own way to get to the show. You had to pay your own flights, everything. You had to have a job too, because nobody was paying for your supplements or anything like that. You had to have a job, so you worked, make the time to the gym, you go to school. I had to rush from the school over to the gym, get my workout done. Then when Joe gave you a $1,000 gift, that was great, man. $1,000 was a lot of money then.
And people still say Larry's effect on the audience, they've never witnessed anything like it. When his music came, he walked out in silhouette and just stood there. And of course, with those arms and those delts, you could tell it was Larry Scott and the hair. You know, he had his own particular shape. He had these great arms, great delts, and he posed, and the audience went nuts. They were standing on the chairs, jumping up and down, and people that were there, I wasn't there, say it was like Beatlemania. It was just absolutely raucous.
And I got a chance to meet Larry Scott and saw him pose from the audience, and wow, what a moment that was. I mean, you've probably read about that, about Larry Scott, his appearance there was just tremendous.
I never saw it, never had the opportunity to go and see the Mr. Olympia when Larry Scott won. But I remember reading religiously, and he was so impressive in those days. You know, he had that blonde hair, he had that real California look.
The next year, we Mr. Olympia, and I said, I'm going to go in this one more year. Because I know that the happiness doesn't exist on the stage. It exists in the family. So I want to win it the second time, so at least I can say that it wasn't one time thing. I won it twice. And then I'm going to retire.
Larry won the Olympia in 65 and 66 in really outstanding fashion. But he was also aware of somebody coming up behind him real fast.
After I was given the trophy, the second Olympia, I said, I want you to appreciate their loyalty and their adulation and everything. And that's what I told him. I told him from my heart. It was a great honor. I thought something out from a little Pocatello kid to get this kind of an honor. And I really appreciated him. But tonight is my last contest.
And Larry, you know, won the title those first 2 years, and then he decided to retire. He had other things to do. And along came Sergio.
When Sergio Oliva came onto the scene, his presence was impossible to ignore. Blessed with an enormous amount of raw talent and driven by a true warrior spirit, Oliva ascended the ranks of his contemporaries with a grace that made him seem almost unreal. His nickname, The Myth, was well earned.
Joe said, I got a fella here that I want you to meet. He's from Cuba. And he got a great body, and Joe was always bringing those kind of things just to spur you on. And so Sergio Oliva came walking back. He couldn't speak any English at all then. He was just spoke Spanish totally. But I looked at his body and I thought, I am never going to beat this guy. I'd already decided I was going to quit, but I thought, I'm glad I'm quitting because I know I'm not going to beat this guy. He's got natural blessings in his body, his proportions, his size, everything. It was just magnificent. I've never seen a bodybuilder like him.
I first met Sergio Oliva outside Gold's Gym when it was on 2nd Street in Santa Monica. That was the second location. And I still can remember these arms coming out of a Hawaiian shirt with a split in it in order to give him enough room for these huge arms. Sergio is one of the most gifted genetic bodybuilders there ever was. This huge chest, huge arms, flaring thighs, tiny waist. But he was just this incredible display of genetics, and everybody was impressed. Nobody's ever not been impressed by Sergio Oliva.
Now, I had the good fortune of meeting Sergio and becoming friends with him early on. We competed in the 1966 Junior Mr. America contest in San Jose. That was the first national contest I'd ever competed in. I was 19 at the time. When I met Sergio, I had never seen anybody that genetically gifted. Still to this day, I haven't. I well remember this. Sergio only weighed 197 pounds that day. Yet each one of his thighs measured 29 inches. His waist was only 27. He was so far advanced over the rest of us. Everybody else could have just posed their ass off, and Sergio could have stood there, and he walked away with the contest.
And Sergio just rewrote the books in terms of, you know, round muscle bellies on the small joints. He had this small head that made everything else look massive. You know, it's an illusion. I'd been to a couple of universities and seen all the guys, Arnold, Draper, Park, you know, and impressed, you know. The first time Sergio walked out, I just went back in my seat. He ambled out. There was this, is this human? You know, it was like some sort of holograph that had been made out. The roundness of the muscles, the small waist, the size of his arms when he hit the poses. I've never shot back in my chair at anybody since. You know, it was just amazing.
Though Sergio Oliva was in the best shape of his life in the early 70s, he was succeeded handily by Arnold. As one titan faded and a new one rose into the spotlight, it was the IFBB that was slowly on the rise as the 1960s came to a close.
Well, yeah, along came the 70s and you know, the culture of the country and the world was